Not okay. Uh, uh, yeah. So Anurag runs Exchange for Media. I think those of us in the business do follow that website extensively, and its related publications. So I think in today's session we're really going to talk about uh, things around print media, and especially whether print media in India is at a tipping point as far as the digital ecosystem is concerned. As we all know, the Western world has um, traditional advertising for newspapers has taken a massive dip in the Western world. Uh, Today, for example, in the US, advertising revenue stands at about 20 billion, which is at a 1950 level, adjusted for inflation. So there's been massive degrowth in advertising in some of those markets, and whether in India we should be prepared and learn some lessons from what has happened to the print industry in the West. So those are some of the things I think we will be discussing, and also how does that change our journalistic practices, how we gather content, how we publish, how we print, how we present our content, all those associated factors. So I think I'd like to direct my first question at Mr. Mittal. Now, interestingly, at HT Media, you have a presence across a general, Hindustan Times, a general category newspaper in English. You have a business newspaper in Mint, and you have a regional paper in Hindustan. So you see that gamut of regional special interest as well as general news. And you've also embarked on some, pretty significant digital initiatives. So can you give us an overview of what your experience has been, and whether you see a divergence in what kind of divergence you might see, say, from the readers of, say, the Wall Street Journal in the US versus those of the Mint in India, especially as far as the digital ecosystem is concerned?
Yeah, sure, Jay. Well, I've been answering this question for now last 3 years because anybody coming in from the Western world seems to think that, look, how can print media do well in India? But having said that, I think even if you go back during the last 4 or 5 years and the economic downturn, print media, and if I sort of break it up between urban India, which is metro India, which is English media, and the vernacular, I think English media has grown in spite of the economic downturn. And there are various reasons for it. 2 or 3 of the main reasons that are really there are, which the first one really I think is demographics. First, India literacy is pretty low. We talk about literacy of 60-70%, but knowing how to sign your name is not really literacy. To my mind, literacy in India is not probably more than 30-40%. So that has yet to catch up, more so in rural India than metro India. 2, I think still news or the ability to read a newspaper is aspirational. A lot of people, especially who get educated later in life, they take pride if they're able to read a newspaper. So we are still at that stage, and not at the stage where you are running to catch a metro at the New York Metro or something and sort of quickly grab a copy from the kiosk here. India is basically driven by, or the media is driven by, you got Bollywood, you got cricket, and you got news. We love the news, whether it's the neighbor, your municipality, or your small town, or maybe the country. But news, you're willing to sort of listen and get updated every 2-3 hours. So I think all these demographics really, and the fact that newspapers have been so cheap, everybody, I mean, even a rickshaw puller doesn't mind buying a copy every day. My driver buys a copy every day. So, and it's not that I work for Hindustan Times, he gets a free copy or anything like that. He buys it off from one of the vendors. So which speaks a lot that the person is willing to spend that amount of money because he sees value. and his ability to be able to educate himself or be abreast with what's happening. TV as a medium, I think in India has yet to arrive in the fashion in where the Western world has arrived. It's too linear. It's not convenient in terms of the programming and the time to your timing as such. So like in the Western world, you can sort of package and get your 12 serials that you want or whatever it is in one shot and see them in a day or at your convenience. You don't get that in India as yet. So these demographic factors and the fact that the subscription has been so low has made it very habitual. That in spite of the fact that you may be a very digitally aware person, a morning newspaper with your morning cup of tea is a must. The broadsheet is there to stay at least for the moment. So, whereas in the Western world, just to draw a parallel, 50% of the revenues in the Western world were from subscription. In India, in urban cities, my revenues are just 13% from subscription. So my revenue model did not get upset overnight. Classifieds. In the US or the Western world, the classifieds form 30% of the advertising pie that the newspapers used to get. In my case, it's just 9%. And of that, 50% is, sorry to be so dispassionate, but it's births and deaths. So that's also here to stay. So if a revenue model doesn't get upset as such, I'm able to fund a lot of my development and my ability to keep churning out and circulating copies. So, these are the differences between India and what is Western world. And therefore, print in India has really survived and has actually prospered. But having said all that, I think it's inexorable. It's a trend. It will come through. And if the topic is like, is print media on a tipping point? I think in metros, it's past the tipping point. Many of us will have to, sort of, in newspapers, willy-nilly, will have to adopt a digital paradigm. There's no way. So let's take the example of Mint, because I do read that and I like that paper. Let's take the latest story that broke out, which is the Hindustan Lever buyback. Now, in Hindustan Lever buyback, the moment it happened, digitally the story was broken. In the sense, news feeds went out. Within 1 hour, there was a follow-up story. So, the surprise of it was out. In the next day's newspaper, it was followed up with a more analysis and in-depth as to why the parent, Unilever, feels that at 600 rupees, it's still a great buy. So there was a different perspective and a different twist that was given. So that paradigm of digital change has already come through. Now, how will it change the revenue line and the cost line? Will come through over the next so many years. But there's a long way to go still in India because of all the factors that I narrated and the differentiation from the West that is there out here. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot. Now, a couple of interesting points over there. One is, that there are several macro factors, I think, that are still going to be driving growth of the print business in India. But, one question does come up, as you said, as, digital will come. And just as the West is trying to figure out revenue models, Annurag, maybe a question for you, since you kind of see the overall view, looking at a lot of companies. Have you seen companies here start to adopt any viable business models in the digital world as far as media is concerned? And also, if you have any comments on what Vinay was
newspaper,
saying.
as far as newspaper.
Yeah.
Thank you. I must tell you why I'm late. Last time I was speaking at a ASSOCHAM entrepreneurship conference. It was 95 minutes late. I was not informed, so I reached in time. This time I kept asking my friends at ASSOCHAM. Nobody answered. Only when I got an SMS I started. So I don't like being late. In fact, I'm always on time. There are people in the audience who will bear me out. So I wanted to tell you why I'm late. We in the media always blame everything on other people. So I am in the media. Coming, Jehill, to your question. See, the biggest reason why that hasn't happened, it's very obvious, is that there's no advertising online. And media companies, I keep saying, are not thinking about the future. Most media companies. They're talking about the future, but they're not thinking of the future. They're very worried about what are they making today? They do not have the luxury, either in terms of financial muscle, even if you are now funded by the largest business owner in the country or funded by the sixth largest business owner in the country, they are not really thinking of tomorrow. Most, I mean, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. The second is, I don't think they have the talent that is required for the media company of the future. I think these are, in my view, I know these sound philosophical and I hate to be philosophical, though I get my inspiration from Mr. Sharan. But really, these are the two reasons I'd say which are not leading newspaper companies or media companies to make digital their primary play. Two more points on that. Really, if you look at Hindustan Times, Mr. Mittal is here. I mean, Hindustan Times has a very good offering in terms of live mint, which is digital, but it really doesn't make enough money from the main paper. First, you have to make money from the main paper to make money from mint, from the online paper. Second is, today if you look at Hindustan Times balance sheet, the money is coming, the contribution to the bottom line is from Hindustan. So regional, I know that in the next 60 days, Times of India is launching a Chennai edition, as in Chennai, a Tamil product. So really, it's very obvious that the growth is in Indian language. And you know, again, I've been saying this, that the obituary of newspapers has been written for too long in India. For the last 12 years since I turned an entrepreneur, everyone is talking about the demise of newspapers for the last 10 years. I can tell you that the newspapers are the only profitable business model in India. If you look at Times of India, we don't know the real numbers, but estimation is probably 4,700 crores top line and about 1,000 crores bottom line. I don't think there is any other media company that makes that kind of money. Second, look at Hindustan Times. Look at where has Hindustan Times gone in 8 years. It's been a fantastic story, profitable. So really, newspapers are still very profitable. To talk about the fact that they will die, you know, a lot of people talking about digital because it's either or. It's not either or. Newspapers, look at what Times of India is doing. Newspapers are embracing digital. So really, the cliche that we used to talk about, that you're not in the newspaper business, you're in the news business, it started to really manifest itself as a reality. Also, I mean, the fact that, you know, for many years, Times of India wouldn't look at Navbharat Times as a serious offering in its stable. Whatever little I know, over the next 12 months, you'll know that Navbharat Times is a sleeping giant that will wake up. Because when Times of India looks at Hindustan Times number and sees Hindustan is contributing close to a lion's share of contribution to the bottom line, or if you have a Bhaskar or a Jagran that have grown to the numbers that they've grown. I know for Bhaskar the quarter has not been the best, but really they know that Navbharat Times can contribute to their bottom line. Last but not the least, you know, I was seeing again Mr. Sharan here, and I said, you know, newspapers are like bureaucrats. Newspapers are like bureaucrats. Now, I mean, he was in the defense ministry, he was running FTII, now he's in Doordarshan. You know, really, they're journalists, not in, they're in the business of content now, and in the business of creating brand. They are not, I mean, they go to a ministry, they follow the same rules. How to handle their minister, how to deal with files, whatever. How to be thought leaders, how to do. Similarly, newspapers are in India really preparing for the day when online spend will be probably 8 to 10%. We are at 4% or 3.5%, less than 4%, whichever estimate. You take Pitch Madison Advertising Outlook. So really, newspapers will adopt. Newspapers have the cash to build. I know in the online business of HT, they do not make enough money. But that's the cost of learning the online business. That's the cost of being ready for the future. So, in nutshell, online is not yet happened in India in the way it has happened in the West. So, to compare online in India with the way it happens in West, where newspapers have genuinely declined in almost all forms in terms of their circulation, readership, revenues, their potential for future. In India, over the next 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised that most Indian language newspapers show better growth than what they're showing today.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I think brings up an interesting point is, you know, and that's a question I'd like to direct at Mr. Bhattacharjee. You know, being an English language newspaper, and, you know, like Annurag said, is a lot of the growth is actually, in terms of revenue numbers and all that, is actually coming from the regional papers and Hindi papers. As an English language newspaper, does that worry you because of the fact that do you believe that the English language reader may start to behave like his Western counterpart, the SECA, SECB reader start to behave like his Indian counterpart, and as online access improves in our country, part of the reason we may not have hit that digital tipping point is because overall we are a very poorly penetrated country as far as internet goes. Now, over the next 3-4 years, as all these 4G plans come into effect, fixed broadline comes into effect, do you at all worry that there is a macro trend that will catch up and your reader's behavior, which is closer to the Western reader, catch up with you in terms of the digital ecosystem?
Thanks, Jehill. It's one of the advantage of sitting with a good panel is that you learn so much. I mean, as Annurag was speaking and before that Vinay, I mean, I really realized that there are so many interesting things in this panel the last few minutes that I've really picked up, and I intend to use that as my wisdom as later on in some other place. So thanks, Annurag, thanks, Vinay. Those are like wonderful pieces of information and analysis. But honestly, I mean, it really set me thinking, and that's and as Jehill said, I am coming in from a slightly different take on why about the print media. You're absolutely right about the technology issue, but you know what? I think the biggest risk for the print media does not come from technology, but from print media itself, which is the content that we are giving out. We are at a stage in our political history where the entire country is getting every year more and more convulsed with issues which grip the people. There are some fantastic issues that people have started talking to, discussing, making positions known, coming out on the streets. The problem for the print media will come that if we start, instead of being respectful towards that audience, if we start giving them information either which is biased, either that is paid for, or that is frankly not germane to the developments that's happening. Now, these are the bigger risk for the newspapers than anything else coming in from outside. It is not the technological divide which is the risk for the newspapers. The risk lies here. Because every day, when I write my copy, when anybody else, when Chaitanya writes his copy, that copy today reaches 1 million people who immediately respond by saying whether I'm, first of all, whether I'm honest. Second, whether I understand. And third, whether it's relevant for the issues that are being discussed. It is not possible for us to live in the early days with just a very limited letters to the editor, which we could censor and put out only what we wanted to. Today, people react instantly. And newspapers in India are, frankly speaking, whether in English, Hindi, Bengali, anything, are reacting and are trying to react to this challenge. Because this is where the biggest issues are coming up. People are saying, I don't want my information from this guy who is putting up something which I don't trust. And this is what something that we have to be able to come out. Do we have the ability to say that the people who are running the media have interests of the media? I mean, we know what happened in Bengal recently. Now, these are very significant issues that are coming up. And those are something which, if a guy gets turned off in a shop buying a particular product, chances are that he'll avoid that shop. He won't say that, okay, dusra product ho sakta hai, theek hai. So similarly, if a guy has been cheated by a newspaper, which apparently was trying, she believed, was giving him good news, then he'll obviously have a problem believing the entire set of products coming from that shop. So if we are the shop giving out information, then there is a serious credibility issue which is affecting us. The other issues follow from there, but they, I think, are something which are more long-term. And of that, I would say of the three following from this is the population issue, the technology issue, and the growth issue. I'll just quickly go through them. On population, as I said, this is a political, the people are coming out. It's a new generation that's coming up. Is the print media or any media for us, are we sensitive? Are we able to handle them? Like we talked about just that. The third is, of course, the issue about whether we are able to make them participate. So whether it's English, Hindi, anybody, the winner will be who can make the people participate, make them involved, make them give information, and not to say, it's no point saying, I give you the truthful news. People don't need the banner. They can see it. They can check it out immediately. Just a alt tab, and you can see whether the next guy is actually given the more credible information. Vinay talked about the HUL, the Unilever buyback. Now, you can just simply do an alt click to see whether the guy who's competing and is giving the information, whether he's giving the correct information or there's somebody else giving the correct information. It's a challenge. And this is something that is coming out very majorly. But a saving grace for media would be, print media would be technology. The telecom sector in India, the 3G and the 4G sector will take at least a few more years. The biggest problem is none of the telecom companies in India have the bandwidth to be able to give a newspaper satisfaction, the sort of bandwidth. Everybody works on a bandwidth in every circle of around 100 megahertz. That's the smallest in any country in the world. Even Indonesia, Vietnam give larger bandwidth. So obviously, if you are trying to sell, if you are trying to float a medium of information on the technological platform, it's simply not there. And this is a problem that has not been sorted as yet. It's taking a lot of time because companies have to, the ecosystem has to move to something like 2100 megahertz. 2100 is not yet available. It's not yet worked out because part of it is handled by the defense forces. DOT holds part of it. Those things have to be settled. Right now, you have got broadcasting happening on, the entire thing is happening on 700, 800, 900, 1800, 2300. It is a huge platform. There's nobody who's going to manufacture a reasonably priced smartphone device at something like 2500 when he's got to have so many bands for which it has to be compatible. It simply is not possible. But if it collapses into a more coherent cluster of something like 2100 or so, the reason I'm saying 2100 is because when I look at the bands, that seems to be the one where it's possible to actually migrate the guys into a particular set, into a reasonable band, which is where they can have a pan-India connectivity. Then possibly we could get them to a price where a technological device is available at 2500, because that's the price at which most people buy in India. And then possibly we'll have. So that is a technological obstacle which will keep print media very comfortable for the next few years, come very, very nicely. And the third is, of course, the fact that let's not compare ourselves with any other of the Western countries. Any countries, we are growing even at 5%, 7%. It's a big growth rate. So many people coming into it. The demand for news and others is essentially going to be huge. And this is something, it's impossible to feel any industry really shrinking in this sort of an environment unless they do wrong. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, Mr. Kalbag, question for you now. From a magazine editor standpoint, we've talked about newspapers and newspapers addressing that daily need and that daily, it's a habit forming sort of exercise. The newspapers come home in the morning, so it's more part of daily life. Now, how does a magazine deal with the evolution of the digital ecosystem? Do you view it as more of a threat or more of an opportunity to expand your offerings, compete, say, with the newspaper, as you build your brand online and in a special interest area like business?
Yeah, well, very briefly, in my case, I have a great advantage because I worked in a wire agency for almost a quarter century. So, and the interesting point for me is that magazines, we do not think like a magazine any longer. We think on a daily and in fact a real-time basis, and that's the biggest change that's happened in terms of digital journalism. Business Today journalists, and I also edit a couple of other magazines in the India Today group, we all think on real-time terms. We respond to stories as they happen. The website is live. It carries news in a live manner. We have a huge number of page views. When about a year ago, when we started cranking it up 2 years ago, when we started cranking it up in a big way, we were already starting to hit about 1 million page views a month. So as far as I'm concerned, the luxury that we have is that we're able to combine the immediacy of news on a daily basis and package it and do a great visual job, design, graphics, pictures and so on in print. But the same thing, there's a very finite amount of real estate in paper, and because of the economics of advertising in India, which is completely upside down, the price of the magazine has no correlation to the cost of producing the magazine. I think Business Today costs about a fifth of what it actually takes to produce. And, you know, so what happens then is that you actually have endless real estate on the web. You can publish anything you want. You can publish slideshows. You can do podcasts. So at Business Today, for instance, Business Today journalists are podcasting. They take flip video cameras for interviews. You know, they record people they have video regularly. We do video podcasts. There's a YouTube channel. There's Twitter and Facebook, so you name it. I also think that the magazine format actually is a pretty good way of introducing some sanity into this situation, because my feeling, especially in India, and if you look at what's happening in other parts of the world, especially in India, what's starting to happen and is that digital journalism is also breeding its own form of what I call there are too many twits on Twitter. I mean, there's lots of rubbish going around which is starting to be taken seriously. And this is happening all the time. When the Boston attacks occurred recently, the wrong person was identified, happened to be an Indian, and this started becoming viral because all the major TV channels started using that. And so I think that's one part of it. I think actually taking the time to do proper analysis, and you can get the news out very quickly, but to also understand that anything that you get out on the web is now actually a global audience, and you do not have the luxury of saying I work for a Delhi newspaper or an Indian magazine or whatever. Anything you write now on the web is visible all over the world, and you are liable, you're held culpable for anything that you do that's wrong. And I think that's pretty good, but we haven't got there yet in many ways in terms of quality controls and so on. But just to go back to a couple of things that Subhomoy was saying, I actually think the change is happening at very, very rapid speeds. The magazine market actually in India is shrinking. The newspaper markets are expanding to some extent, and that's, I think, a bit of a misconception because of this, what Vinay was talking about in terms of increased literacy and people aspiring to, maybe the Hindi newspaper in the small towns and the English newspaper in larger towns and so on. But the fact is that the digital world is going to be upon us in ways that we haven't even thought about. Handphone sales are growing very rapidly. 2.5, 3G is what we have now. If 4G started, I think data usage is growing 20% month on month, if I'm not mistaken. If 4G starts getting offered at low prices, the effects are going to be shattering as far as the news media is concerned. So more and more young people are going to consume news on their mobiles, on their handhelds and mobiles. Traditional ways of presenting news, pictures, images, graphics, whatever, are going to have to be changed drastically. We'll have to have interactivity. We'll have to really start to think about whether so far, frankly, newspapers and magazines in India were surviving because somebody cooked up a readership figure, not even circulation, readership, or TAM figures for television or TRPs or whatever. I think what's going to happen is that the reader is starting to get more and more central in this equation. You'll have to cater to the reader in many ways. You'll be caught out if you start to do things wrong. And that's going to have a democratizing influence. And we have this pretense of having citizen journalism and so on, but I don't think it's really there yet. And about 9 years ago in South Korea, I saw this paper called omynews.com, which was originally in Korean, and they boasted that they had 30,000 reporters. And I'm sure it's grown since then. Korea is a very wide country, as we know. So that's collaborative journalism in a way. The reader starts to actually tell you what he or she wants. And you've got to follow suit, because otherwise what will happen? So we don't have any way of telling among ourselves on what constitutes the best stuff. On a website, you know what's been the most read, the most emailed. You can measure things much better. You have hits and so on. There's all kinds of data that shows you what's actually more credible for. So I think this, as smartphone prices fall, and we have tablets, phablets, smartphones, I think the price is starting to come down inexorably now. We're going to start to see this movement towards more and more consumption of news and media and so on, even advertising and the way you interact with advertising on handhelds. And frankly, it's going to be what I think of as 6 inches and not even 3 feet to your desktop. And that's the difference. And not even 10 feet to a larger screen if you're in a movie hall or something. Everything is going to be consumed on your handheld.
No, that's a very interesting point, and I think the scary thing, if that future does come about quicker than we think, I think the scary thing is that have we quite evolved the business models? Because like Annurag said, that online advertising still remains a very, very small percentage of overall advertising. So if that future is upon us in the next 3-4 years, are we able to monetize all those readers who are in fact accessing the news online?
Sorry to interrupt, but I just got a figure last night that last year digital advertising in the United States was $36.6 billion.
Yeah.
36.6. And I worked out, just a few days ago, they published Indian figures for online advertising for 2012-13, and that figure was equivalent to $418 million. So, we are a very far way from 36.6 billion. Sorry.
Correct. So, that brings me to a question, for you, Subhomoy, is, again, we've seen with online behavior that, as people experiment with revenue models, they're trying to extract some subscription fees out of the reader. We had this trend where everybody put everything for free online first, and then they figured out that, advertising is not going to cover it. So they started to try and put together some sort of subscription or freemium kind of models. Do you believe that, the strength of the offline brand, is really going to drive future subscription revenue online, in that sense that people will be willing to pay for some brands and some content? I think, like Vinay mentioned, that there is this general category of news which is available for free. You can just go to Google News and just get it. And people don't want to go to a newspaper for that, may not want to go to a newspaper for that anymore. What they may go to a newspaper for is that deeper analysis, insight, as he mentioned, that why is that 600 rupee price for Unilever justified, the analysis on that, and people might be willing to pay for that. So does that alter the way you write and, analyze and gather and present your offerings?
Sure, Jehill. I mean, the first thing is that you almost like sounding music to your ears. It's like going back to long form journalism.
Yes, absolutely.
That you get a chance to say all those things. But having said that, let's even look at the current models that are coming up. We've got the Financial Times, which is the only one which has been able to successfully monetize it. But the ones who actually have the largest circulation is Guardian. But again, those are coming from abroad. When I look at India, let's look at, for instance, something like breaking views in Reuters. Now that does well. That's the model, I suppose, which people would be talking of in terms of analysis, analytical content. But how much of that can be monetized and how much would be the subscription value? I would think that that would not be very high because of the very nature of the product offered. If I am not a particular sector specialist, my interest in that sector and that sort of news would be just very fleeting. So essentially it is something which every newspaper group in India right now is trying to work out. Whether they say it, whether they don't say it, everyone is trying to figure out whether there's a model that is looking usable. Right now, there is no manna. In fact, if this particular session that we're having, at the end of it, if you could come out with a model that works, wow, wonderful. I mean, that's everybody would sort of really buy. So that's the answer. In terms of, because monetizing internet for news has been, there have been every sort of, up till now at least one can think of, every sort of model has been tried and none, excepting, as I said, one, the FT and others, hasn't really worked. So but the point is more that whether the issue about whether the offline brand would drive the online media, well, I would think so. Because if I'm going to go to one of the million sites for news, I either do Yahoo or Google News, or else I go to a site which I know that there's this particular author there, there's somebody writing, or there's a group of authors writing whom I have a particular, I tend to think that they know what they're writing about. I would definitely go there. Yes, so that part would definitely work through.
Okay, great. Vinay, your comments on this issue also, and also if you could comment on, how if you are in fact seeing advertiser behavior changing, is there more, are there more budget allocations to digital? Do you see the revenue numbers say it, but do you see a market shift from English to regional as well? So both digital as well as regional, if you could address that from an advertiser behavior standpoint.
Yeah, so in advertiser behaviors, yes, the clients are allocating more advertising or marketing budget towards digital, but it's still small, like 3 to 5%. Again, levers, for instance, they pretty much mandate that every year they will increasingly spend more on digital advertising. So as I said, it is inexorable. The trend is here to come. But you know what, the trend comes, both the revenue and the cost models will change. For instance, in terms of costs, you earlier used to invest in huge studios, etc., and a huge capex. Today you can shoot videos with a iPhone or one of those smartphones. So things have become that much cheaper. OB vans for television. Today you can do it with a backpack. So things have become cheaper. So those models will change, technology will take over. You don't need to have a battalion of reporters and editors who will do separate print, separate digital. No, you can have technology which will serve both, move it into the social media, do your website, move it into print, etc. and all that. So all those things will come through. But in India, it's still some way off because of the fact that you're so habituated to it, and the younger generation, some more generations have to come through before that habit becomes lesser and lesser. So to my mind, both digital and print will coexist. Like in Singapore, for instance, I mean, you take Singapore Press Holdings, you got a 44% EBITDA margin for those guys in a fully wired broadband economy where you get a broadband which you pay for and not the narrow band having paid for broadband that you get in India. So, to my mind, that's here to stay, but ultimately, let's say 5-10 years down the line, yes, English in metros will be the first one to get affected. Profitability may not get affected because costs will also shrink. Absolute numbers in terms of revenue may undergo a change because the revenue will get dissipated over a number of digital sites. Because as Chaitanya said, the real estate is sort of infinite on the net here.
Yeah.
Out here it is number of finite pages. So that's on the English piece and how things will say. On the Hindi piece, yes, I think the tail is much longer. But it all depends on the adoption of 4G. If that tablet sort of is a big game changer and the adoption is such that it takes the technology leapfrogs, like for instance, India leapfrogged from a paging, it sort of leapfrogged the paging era, right into the mobile phone era. If that happens, then the guys who are sort of extolling the fact that the regional is here to stay, we just find that whole thing has got compressed and technology has got adopted by the hinterland faster than the metros here.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't sort of comment on that really to say what will happen, but these are the ifs and buts that could happen on the regional front.
Okay. So, Annurag, the question for you now: what do you think this is going to do to the entire value chain of a value chain and the presence of a media company across media? So today, you used to have the English newspapers that stuck to the English market, the Hindi stuck to Hindi. TV guys were in TV. Today you have this whole move towards, everybody's got to be in everything.
Right.
Now, do you see this trend accentuating, and will we be left standing with, a few media conglomerates with a toe in almost every pie because we don't really know where the revenues are going to come from. So everybody's right now putting a stake in the ground on everything.
See, I think I'll tell you, and I'm not a cynical person. I'm a very positive person. I'd like to believe. Normally, I sweat here whenever I come to the Meridian, and I'm sure you know the answer. I got married in this room, so whenever I'm in this room, I'm sweating for a change. So I'm like shivering. I think I'm moving from sweating to shivering. But coming back to your question, I think most of the decisions that happen at the media owners and are not logical. And I know there are very bright CEOs that had large media companies, and I admire some of them. When I grow up, I want to be like some of them. But I think a lot of decisions in media, especially media companies, are still very entrepreneur-led. I can talk of the biggest media company, the second media, and they have professionals in the senior management or CEOs, but they are very entrepreneurial-led. So a lot of decisions that happen in media in terms of being in a certain space are not really logical. For a listed company, yes, they might have to really think of a creative way to show synergy. So I don't think they are in all forms of media because it's a logical or the best thing to do. It's sometimes driven by things where a politician friend might have said, why don't you come to our market and we'll support you. And I've been in this business 13 years, so trust me what I'm saying. Having said that, I wanted to ask a question if you, how many of you read the physical broadsheet newspaper today in this room? The ones that, so about 60%, is that fair? 60% read? Okay, the ones that didn't read the physical broadsheet, you read 4. Okay, fine. So it's more than 60%. Right. That's fine. And how many, the ones who did not read the newspaper, what do you read? Did you consume news on a tablet? What, or your wife knows everything, she just tells you top line and you don't have to really tune in.
Phone, I think.
Phone, so, right?
Phone.
So really the guys who are consuming digital, and this is a business audience, is even lower. So clearly newspapers over the next 10 years don't have to worry. And I seriously mean it. Yes, they're under tremendous pressure. And I want to go to Vinay's example of Singapore. I understand where he's coming from, where both digital and print coexist, but Singapore is a monopoly for a media company, and you know which media company, right? So I don't think Singapore is a good example to give. I also don't think UK, I was speaking in January at the digital content monetization marketplace in London, and my topic I told at the last conference was made in Europe, consumed in India. That was my topic. And I kept scratching my head. I said, you know, what will I say? Everything in India is free. And I really wanted to show the first slide as made in Europe, consumed in India, Sonia Gandhi. But then I said, I want to be alive, you know. So I showed some beers, Amstel and all. Point is, in India, everything is free. Right? And I don't see that changing. It's good to talk about firewalls. It's good to talk about paid content. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's taken so many years in the television domain for digitization to happen. I think newspapers have a role to play. Regional newspapers have an even larger role to play. Newspaper and media owners will be in all spaces. I don't think there is a doubt about that. Look at, I gave you a Times of India example. I think they'll launch a Tamil newspaper very soon. 3 months, 6 months. You know what they did in West Bengal. You know what they did with Vijay Karnataka. You know what they're doing in Gujarat. So clearly they know that the margins from English are under pressure. The clients are wanting more ROI. Television is the biggest threat. Digital is an experimental medium. So, you know, you experiment with that. So a lot of experimentation money that used to go in newspaper is going into digital. It's small, but the fact is that was the topping. That's not coming. So on and so forth. So I think really digital is important, and newspaper started as community paper. Whether you look at a Lokmat in Maharashtra, I think newspapers have to again come back into the business of being in building communities, serving communities. And I'm not talking of a special interest website like ours or a B2B site. I'm talking on newspapers are serving communities. And if they are serving communities, communities are digital. But biggest problem is, are they willing to be a differentiated product? Today, no consumer, Subhomoy was saying what he was saying, but no reader pays for anything online, because if he doesn't read one, he can read other. They're pretty similar. They've taken the same press release, reacted and you know, it's just, there's no differentiation. The reason Mint is a success is because it's a different newspaper than ET. And I wanted to say one more thing. I think newspapers are missing the opportunity of curating content. I think the biggest threat will come to newspapers where there are digital products which are collating, curating content, because all of us are under pressure on time. So we'll go to one product which helps us look at, I want to know everything that's happening in media, advertising, marketing. If there is a product which can give me that, I subscribe to that. I want to know everything in digital. So if there is a site like that that I subscribe to, which I spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending, I know fairly well what's happening in digital domain. So I think that's the opportunity newspapers can. And last but not, I think newspapers' biggest threat in India is from loss of credibility. I don't think it's from the business model. I think the business model is, I think what's happened over the last 2-3 years in newspapers business, and generally in the media business in terms of presumptive credibility going away, I think that is the biggest threat. And that's where specialist blogs, who have no advertising, support or to worry about advertising, and some of them are irresponsible also, are the biggest threat to newspaper. So rather than going to a food columnist in a certain newspaper, you can go to a website that is specialist. And again, I keep talking about at conference about this network that Govindraj Yachiraj is building called the Ping Network. I think to me, that's the formula that newspapers should take. They are no longer in the newspaper business. They have to prepare for future. So yes, they will be in all formats because they are about the brand and content. So a newspaper's biggest competition is NDTV. 2 billion downloads. Is it in the news business or is it in the television business? So I don't think newspapers have to worry about other media. First, they have to worry about what they are doing. And if you take away the top 7-8 newspapers, most of the newspapers are under tremendous stress because they've never thought of future. They've never thought of competition. Some newspapers don't even have professionals. Let me take the name of an example of a newspaper, Gujarat Samachar. Very profitable newspaper, 170 crores profit. But if you were to bring a professional team, where there was a professional editor, there was a professional CEO, do you think that the 170 crore profit will stay 170 crore? I'm not sure.
Great. Okay, thanks. I think it's time to move to some Q&A. So, happy to take questions for the panel. Yes, please. Yeah, are there mics circulating somewhere? Yeah.
We were talking about print to digital. Now, maybe it's somewhat speculative, but, we start with a presupposition that an average consumer of the news is going to, even in the digital era, get his news from